I like this. One of the most popular sessions of last year's adventure together was the Search Engine Optimization talk by TourRadar's Chief Operating Officer, Nico Treve, and the TourRadar team of SEO specialists.
Now what? Well, when you're on a good thing, just stick with it. So as the title suggests, SEO is an ever-moving target. So we thought we'd bring the team back for SEO 2.0.
Please welcome to the stage TourRadar's SEO manager, Yvonne Herzog, Senior Product Manager, Andy Lee, and Nico to guide you through the intricacies of search engine optimization.
All right. Thank you, Brandon. Thank you, Caitlin. So, as he highlighted, today we're going to be talking about how to navigate through the crazy updates from Google. Today with me is Yvonne, who's the SEO manager, been with us for now 4 years actually, and Andy, who's working as a senior product manager on the marketing technology team and implementing all of our SEO improvements, and been with us for over 3 years, almost 3 years. So yeah, thank you. Before we get started, we want to try to make this as engaging as possible, similar to last year. So we have an entire team sitting in the background, ready to answer questions that you have. So everybody also in the audience online, use the chat on the right sidebar and ask any question. It doesn't have to be on this topic, but anything SEO related, and our team will be answering that question. And afterwards, we'll be also sending the answers to you together with all the presentations that we're showing today. We also have Lisa. Where's Lisa? She's sitting here. Wave to everyone. She'll also be asking us some questions directly from the chat during the session as well. Cool. So to get started, though, I have a question for you guys. What do these words have in common? Can anybody shout it out from the audience or write it in the chat? Anyone? I think
Oh, yes.
we got it, Travis. So these are the creative, beautiful names that Google throws at us for their updates. And these updates used to have, animal names, but nobody really knows why they had the animal names. Now they swifted over to be a bit more functional, so you actually have an understanding what the updates mean. But the important thing that you need to know is that Google actually updates about thousands of updates on a yearly basis. And these are just the core updates. And now core updates actually have a very impactful, a big impact on the algorithm. And they can be impacting you on a site-wide, which means every single page on the site, or it could impact only a specific page depending on what they're trying to update. Now, I've been working with search engine optimization for around 15 years now. So on one side, it highlights how old I am. On the other side, it highlights I've gained some experience and actually experienced everything you can imagine around SEO. So here's an example. Back in the day with my previous startup, which was TripWolf, back in 2011, there was a Google update which was called the Panda update. Now, the Panda update resulted in, from one day to the next, our site losing about 60% of our traffic, one day to the next. A couple months later, we lost there was another Google update, which was the Penguin update, and we lost another 30% of our traffic. So within a very short amount of time, we lost 90% of our traffic, 90% with just Google updates. Now, obviously, as a startup, we got pretty screwed there, and we had to pivot and move completely to mobile, and that somehow worked. But that traffic, we actually never recovered, ever. But with that experience, and now for the past 8 years at TourRadar, we've managed to navigate and understand what does Google actually want, and what do they need, what is Google aiming, at least from an organic perspective. Paid is a different side. And so as long as you understand that core element, with every update, you either stay constant, or you actually improve with the update and see a significant increase with it. And so what we thought we'd do today is highlight with a couple of the most recent updates, and try to highlight how you can navigate with those specific updates, and what's the common thread to make sure that you always are not negatively impacted. Yvonne will be highlighting the helpful content update, and show how sailing is actually very similar to SEO. And Andy will be highlighting the page experience update and highlight how important not to frustrate the user actually is. So Yvonne, I'll let you take it.
Thank you. Hi. So I have the pleasure to speak not only about Google updates, but also about sailing. Now, you'll be surprised how much you can actually learn from sailing. Just imagine your team is working aboard a sailboat, heading on a journey. Everybody's on the boat, the sails are set, the wind is constantly blowing from the east, so it's perfect sailing weather. Now, you just need to define where you want to go. Question to you: how do you define your destination? I'll give you a couple of seconds to think about it. So some of you might be thinking about the distance, how much time you have, the team, things like that. Others might be thinking about the wind direction. In my first sailing lesson, I was entirely focused on the wind direction. So I thought, okay, if the wind is coming from the east, let's choose the perfect angle, maybe a 90 degrees angle, so let's go to the south. If there's one thing to remember from sailing, it's that the choice of your destination is totally unrelated to your direction. So, your target destination is a sunny island where your team hopes to land and celebrate. The wind is important. It helps you to get there if you make use of your ship, your sails, and the wind. But it does not define where you go. SEO and sailing have a lot in common. So the boat, that's your business. The sunny island, that's position 1 on Google. And on the sunny island, that's where all the customers are. Google algorithm updates are like the wind on the sea. Sometimes it's a light breeze. Sometimes it's a really strong wind, like the Bora in Croatia. And yeah, the wind changes its direction. But the wind is important. If you imagine there is no wind, you couldn't get to the sunny island with your sailboat. Now, some of you might say, well, if the wind is so unreliable, why are we taking a sailboat? We could actually choose not to be dependent on the wind and take a motorboat instead. It's anyways much more fun, it's faster. Well, we all know how expensive fuel is these days. So instead of paying for ads, you can actually get to position 1 simply with knowledge and a clear focus on your customer. Now, if the wind is so important, let's make the attempt together to understand the wind. Google search algorithm. Simply said, it's the formula that defines who to rank first. Well, here's the bad news. With Google's algorithm, it's not like Coca-Cola's formula, for example. Coca-Cola has about 20 ingredients, and that one was one of the most hunted secrets for years. Google's search algorithm is using hundreds of different factors, and these are constantly changing. And if that's not enough, it's using machine learning techniques. So it's evolving constantly. There's no point in really understanding it. Now, here's the good news for you. You don't need to know Google's secret algorithm, because also as a sailor, you don't need to be a meteorologist to be a good sailor. Instead, you need to master 3 SEO sailing techniques. First, provide a solid technical infrastructure. So that's about how fast your page loads, a clean architecture of your website, things like that. Second, the content on your website. Is it helpful? Is it relevant to the user? We will be speaking about these areas in more detail because these were updated in the recent updates. And the third, that's your brand. So ask yourself, are you known as the expert in your field? Do customers trust your brand? And is your brand well known for what you're doing? If you can answer all these questions with yes, then you're fine, and you can focus on content and tech. So, yeah, let's speak about updates. Last year we spoke about these areas in detail. Today we will speak about the updates in these areas. The most recent one, the helpful content update, was rolled out just 6 weeks ago. And it's part of a broader effort to ensure people see more relevant, helpful content written by people for people. As someone working in this area for 7 years now, I can't emphasize enough how important it is to write content for people and not for search engines. Let me give you an example of how not to do it. FindThisBest.com. At first glance, they seem to provide helpful information. So on this landing page about Zoom security cameras, they speak about the different brands. They also state that they did a lot of research and they tested 2,000 cameras. That's quite an effort. Now, if we look at another landing page, we see the problem. This landing page is almost the same. If you look at the text, the content, the start of the sentences, it's exactly the same. The only thing that changes, that's the brands they speak about. Yeah, and guess what? For bullet security cameras, they tested 3,000 cameras. Wow. Well, a user might get impressed, but Google won't. So with this update, they improved their understanding of a website's content. So ask yourself, are you using a lot of boilerplate text or automation for content creation? Well, just don't do that anymore. So how can you actually create helpful content? I'll give an example how TourRadar improved their content based on search intent. Imagine you're going to Paris next weekend and you search for Paris tours on Google. You land on TourRadar's landing page here. Now, what's wrong? So we can see Europe tours, visiting multiple countries in Europe. Also, the tour length is quite long with about 2 weeks. And also the price range is quite high. Now, is that what a user expected? What we did in the past is we listed all the tours going through Paris. Now, back to our initial question, Paris tours. What is it that a user is actually looking for? It's Paris tours, Paris-focused tours. So what we did is we showed tours that spend the whole time in Paris, and also the tour length is much shorter, and the price range is much more what a user would expect. How do we know this is helpful for the user? With this change, we managed to reduce bounce rate, so the amount of users going back to Google after seeing this landing page from about 75% down to 40%. Now, how can you, as a tour operator or a travel agency, how can you create helpful content yourself? Remember our sailing example from the beginning and focus on your customer. Think about their issues and solve their issues. Answer all their questions on your landing page. Ensure that your site's primary purpose is clear and that it's in line with what the user expects. Write original content. Provide additional value and don't just summarize what others are saying. It happens so often that you see always the same answer, but actually you as a tour operator, for example, you have so much expertise. Use this expertise and write about things you're an expert on. And don't produce lots of content in the hope some of it will rank, because you will be punished if you're doing that. And don't use automation for content creation. So if you consider these tips, you're sure to improve your organic traffic. But this is just one side. The other side is the technical part. Now, Andy, could you please tell us more about the update in that area?
Thank you. Thanks. Thank you, Yvonne. So, yeah, I'm here to tell you a little bit today about the page experience update that Google has put out recently, where they're placing more emphasis on metrics that we call Web Vitals. So I'll start by saying this is an update focused on measuring the user experience of your website. So how does Google assess the user experience of a website? How does it know what it's like to be a user? Well, it looks at 3 key metrics, and the metrics are around speed. So as a user, I want to see that page quickly. I've clicked on the result, I want to see a result immediately. The second one is responsiveness. So when I click or I tap or I scroll, the site should respond immediately. And this is known as first input delay. And then there is visual stability, which is when I'm reading the content or I'm trying to click on it, I don't want it moving around. I don't want it to jump or do something unexpected as I'm trying to read. So, first of these, LCP stands for Largest Contentful Paint, and what it means is you need to be loading the part of the site that the user sees as quickly as possible, the top of that page, as quickly as possible. Target time is 2.5 seconds. This example that you see on screen, this page took 14 seconds to load, which is not great. And you can imagine that if you clicked on it as a Google result, 14 seconds before you even see the page is really poor. Secondly, first input delay. So this is where, as I say, when the user clicks, taps, or scrolls on a page, the site must respond. Your target time for a good response is less than 100 milliseconds, literally the blink of an eye. That's as long as the blink of an eye takes. And you need to be responding in that time. This little clip illustrates it. So here I go to click on something, there's the click, 1, 2, 3, finally I've got the page loaded. And it may be a millennial thing, but I'm getting incredibly frustrated in those 3 seconds. So next is layout shift, or CLS. It's another mouthful, it stands for cumulative layout shift. And what this is a good example of it here. When you first hit this page, it looks like this. You found an interesting article you want to read, you start to read it, but then, boom, the content moves down to insert an ad, and you've lost your position. And you find it again, and then boom, the content moves down again to insert another ad. And at this point, again, as a millennial, you're getting really frustrated. So, so what you can do about this, we should talk about in a moment, but there is a target of a minimal amount of layout shift, and basically it just means prevent the page from moving content around. Another example of this where we see a common frustration among users is you go to click a button or use a thing and it moves before you can click on it. That's, it's not great. So, okay, so to give you some more concrete examples, this is a page where we've run this assessment with a tool called PageSpeed Insights. PageSpeed Insights is a free tool you can use to assess your own site. There's also other ones. WebPageTest.org is very good for this. But PageSpeed Insights gives you this overall score out of 100. This site scored 13, which means it's not great. You can also see in the screenshot there the cumulative layout shift in action. In that case, it was that banner which says, accept these cookies, slowly sliding into view. And what you can see here is all of these metrics are red, all of them. So that is that the page takes too long to load. It's not responsive enough. And there is too much layout shift going on. Overall, if you clicked on this, it's 19 seconds before you can actually read the content you're trying to read about this Croatia tour. So that's not great. For a better example, some of you may recognize this website. I need a good example. What are you going to do? And all of the metrics here are green. And so in contrast to what I just said about the previous page, this one will load in 1.1 seconds and be ready to use. So if you found this in Google, this is a far better user experience. And that's for the whole desktop page. The previous one, we were just looking at mobile. So there's a lot more for the browser to actually do to show you this. So it's important to remember that the user does benefit from this. And this is the core focus of this update, is to try and provide results in Google that are more user-friendly. And so, as well as making your experience better for users, you're also getting Google to recognize that and to reward you in ranking as a result. So what can you actually do about these things that I've shown you today? So for the first one, for LCP, one thing that we commonly see people can do that they're not doing is compressing images. You have large image files, you can compress them so that they load faster, so that the user gets to that content more quickly. For input delay, you can remove old or redundant code, particularly marketing tags. Very often what we find is that there are marketing tags that were useful for tracking ads or banners and things like that. Those have been removed, and the code is still there, and it slows the page down. Google's picking up on it. You can get rid of all that. Or it's maybe your own code, maybe your own code that you can remove to clean up the page. And then on CLS, one common improvement is around adding height and width attributes for all your images, including ads, so that the user will see maybe a space, but at least then the content doesn't move when they've started to read it. So it's a much better experience. Okay. And with that, I'll hand back to Nico.
All right. So the key take-home message that I would say, and there's, if you paid attention to the last two updates now from the two of them, from Yvonne and Andy, the one common thread there was the customer. And the main point for Google is they want to provide the best customer experience and to make sure that the customer's question is being answered. So as long as you understand what is the intent of the search, and you're doing it in a way that you're not frustrating them by loading for 15 or 18 seconds, and you can't click on the page, and a page bounces around, you will make sure that you will never be impacted by any of the Google updates, or at least most likely won't be. So the other key aspect, so going back to the sailing analogy, so what are the key metrics that you need to be looking at? So Andy was highlighting now on the technical front, you need a good core foundation, and just look at that one page speed insights test and keep monitoring exactly those values, the LCP, the FID, and the CLS. The other aspect is on the content. What is the easiest way for you to understand when the user comes to your page, it's actually relevant for the user? And that's the bounce rate. If he leaves the page immediately, you know that it's not relevant to what he was actually looking for, or if he doesn't have a long time that he's on the page. And finally, if you have those two elements well enough set up, then automatically you have branded searches coming to you because you have a good experience for the customer. And so you're basically building up that flywheel of SEO. The best tools to use, there's a lot of different tools you can use in industry. There's a lot of very expensive tools that you can use. The best tools are probably the free ones, because with the paid ones, you need a very dedicated SEO specialist just focused on that, which most of you probably don't even have the bandwidth for. But there's so many free tools out there, and you can really see exactly what you need to know and to optimize your site. And these are some of the ones that we would recommend. And the other place to best find out about the updates, just go directly to the source. You have the Google Search Central, which highlights every single core update for you. You don't need to go to some secondary blog, which is very, sometimes can be very misinformed as well. All right, that's it from our side. We might have some questions from Lisa. Do you want to ask the team?
Can you hear me? Should be working, yes. No. Yes, the chat has been quite busy. We have a few questions. Let's just see how many we can get through. So we have the question of, how can you tell that your website has been impacted by the Google update? Whoever wants to take it.
I think the first thing we would do is we would be looking at analytics to see what has happened to our organic traffic. But secondly, we would look into Search Console. With Google Search Console, you can really drill into what's happening in terms of the clicks, the impressions that you've got, and in the regions that's happening in. Because sometimes these things are more locale specific. Do you add anything to that?
No,
Perfect.
You got it.
Sounds good. Would you say, is Google the only source for SEO?
Good question.
Go ahead.
Well, so Google and YouTube are the biggest search engines, and they are driving most of organic traffic. All other search engines like Bing, or if you're focused on Chinese markets or Asian markets, yeah, are different topics. So if you optimize for Google, you make sure that your website will automatically be also optimized for others. Of course, you can use the other analytics tools, but optimizing for your results on Google will automatically also help your other results in other search engines.
What I would add is just you should optimize for the customer.
Yeah, exactly.
Good
If
one.
you're doing that, that's enough.
Awesome. We have some other questions as well. I think we have the time. So basically, what happens if you reach position 1 on Google? Why do you really want to aim for that?
I can take that one. So going back to our sailing analogy, basically, you need to make sure you set your anchor. So if you're sitting in a bay, staying overnight, or if you're staying in the harbor, you need to tie your boat to the pier, or you need to set the anchor well in the sand so it doesn't move. In SEO, it's the same. So you have techniques. You need to keep on performing in all those 3 areas, and yeah, know those techniques to make the right knots and everything like that.
Awesome. Let's see. How long would you say does it usually take until you see the effects of your SEO efforts?
I think it's really hard to say. It really is very difficult because it can be something that was a really blocking problem that you fix, and that can be seen within a few days. You start to see an impact. Other times it can take weeks, even months, for these things to turn around. So it can be really difficult to actually say how long it will take.
Too long.
Yeah.
All right, let's take maybe one more. Since you, Yvonne, talked about not using content automation, how do you feel about AI-generated content?
It depends on the tool. So there are tools where you can get different pricing for the quality of the content. And it's something that you need to evaluate yourself and see what these tools generate for content. My gut feeling, without having tested those specific tools, is it will basically rephrase sentence by sentence. So I'm a bit hesitant about it. It's not a human writing it, which was basically Google's recommendation in relation to that.
I think you will end up with more examples like you showed on your slide there of basically identical pages if you used AI.
All right, I think that's it. Time's up. Thank you very much. I'll get off the set.